Yeah, so we had covered until this what Aradhana ji just read. These are the gifts of life. No matter, we cry many a times, we go through tears and pangs of pain and loss and grief, but this is all gift from life, and that's, if we take it as that, in the middle of a challenge, if one is going through a really dark period, and one says to oneself, okay, let me go through this gift of life, what life has in store for me through this heartache or pain or loss or grief or emotional, whatever. I think suddenly some shift happens in the being, and one is not suffering anymore. One may still go through pain, emotional pain may be there, and it will take some time for it to just completely evaporate or sublimate, but it will appear as a gift from life, that the different rasas of life, just like that dukh ras is also one of the rasas, for example, one has to go through in life. And along with that, we also have taste of, when we are praying intensely, something is happening and then our prayer is heard. We all have those tastes too in life, the joy of high spiritual response, that immediately from your depth of the being, a prayer kind of rises up in the being, and as if from the higher planes, immediately you hear a response, so you read a book, a word, a friend says something, maybe you meet another person, and something changes in life, and that person, that word, that book is just one of the means of the universe to talk to you, to respond to the call. It search for the mystic meaning of its birth and joy of high spiritual response in its throb of satisfaction and content in those moments where we feel that our desire has been fulfilled, whatever little desire it may be in life, whatever little thing maybe we may be seeking in life, and suddenly it feels that, wow, I've gotten that. So for a moment there is extreme contentment and satisfaction in life. And we have discussed in earlier sessions also that this contentment and satisfaction is our true nature. But whenever any seeking is there in life, it's almost like a dark cloud that appears on that blue sky of contentment. And it obscures that peace, happiness, and joy for no reason, which is forever our true nature. And in that moment where the seeking is met, in the moment where the desire is met, one feels that this, the seeking self is, for a moment it disappears because the seeking has been met. So as if, imagine that the dark cloud from that sky disappears for a moment, and that is what we experience as satisfaction and content, it's throb of satisfaction and content in all the sweetness of the gifts of life, its large breath and pulse and thrill of hope and fear. Now, imagine Sri Aurobindo is also talking about fear and hope as thrill. They have a certain thrill in life, and these are to be tasted. These are not to be shooed away. All these, no matter how evil may appear, but they are to be tasted. All these rasas of life, and that is why they are called gifts of life. Pulse and thrill of hope and fear, its taste of pangs and tears and ecstasy. Haven't we all gone through these phases, and still go through pangs of pain and tears, when you have kind of invested yourself intensely somewhere, and whatever ups and downs that one goes through, that intensity of life, tears and ecstasy when, when something is met, as if a desire is met, or a longing, a prayer is answered, one goes through that ecstasy. Its raptures, poignant beat of sudden bliss, you don't even know why you are experiencing so much of bliss and contentment, and yet it's there as a gift from life. The sob of its passion and unending pain. We think that we are through with the pain in life, but life is mysterious and we don't even know what is lurking behind the corner. and another one jumps in, and another one jumps in, and it's almost unending series of these sobs of passion and pain, which keep on coming. And this is what life is. And if one can kind of embrace the life in its fullness, then one would not need to run away from one experience, or run away to the other experience. The thing that we talk in Kabir, you know kind of grinding ourselves between the two stones of duality. When there is good, we want bad, or we at least kind of not want bad, but the good ends soon. And then when there is bad, we don't want to be in the bad, so called bad, because we just see the face value and we don't see the good in the bad, hiding in the bad. So if I can be equanimous with the good and with the bad, which only comes with time, in time we fall into that place of equanimity. It's almost by default that we fall into it. We don't have a choice, I think. uh, and then we can actually embrace life in its fullness. So this was what we already did, and beginning from the last passage, keep sharing whenever you have something to share. Yeah, this one, the murmur and whisper of the unheard sounds. Yeah. Who would like to read? Yeah.
The murmur and whisper of the unheard sounds which crowd around our hearts but find no window to enter, swelled into a canticle of all that suffers to be still unknown, and all that labors vainly to be born, and all the sweetness none will ever taste, and all the beauty that will never be.
Yes. So, this is what Ashwapati is opening up to, owing to the heights of his yoga and the experiences where his consciousness is continuing to expand and touching realms in which our normal, ordinary consciousness, we are not usually aware of those worlds, those planes, those beings, those voices, those cries from the subconscious. And now Ashupati is sensitive enough, owing to the layers of obscurity being shed away from his being. He's sensitive enough and he can listen to these continuing sounds in the universe. So, what are the sounds that he hears amongst all the others that we have read? The murmur and whisper of unheard sounds, which crowd around our hearts but find no window to enter. As if there are infinite possibilities in each one of us, and they are struggling to manifest in our life. They are struggling to manifest. For years, they have been struggling. He hears those voices, those impossibilities which want to manifest itself now in the being. All the bounty of the divine that wants to manifest in earthly mortal life, those murmurs from those unheard sounds, sounds which no one has even heard, because our normal ordinary consciousness is so thick. It's like a thick veil obscuring all that is present in bounty, in divine manifestation, still unmanifest, still not manifest in the mortal realm. So he hears those murmurs and whispers of the unheard sounds. And usually, the imagery, it's beautiful, these imageries through which Sri Aurobindo wants to express, because truth, as they say, truth is so sublime in nature that when words want to express the truth out, words fail miserably. Words really fail miserably, because whatever words we may say, that's not the truth, that's not the truth, because it's just a finger pointing towards the truth. And that is why imagery is used. That is why, these stories or symbolism is used. Visions are given in dreams in which something symbolically is represented to us, because words are never enough. Words cannot transfer the magic of that absolute truth. And that is what we see Sri Aurobindo, doing it beautifully. I don't know if ever it has been done, maybe by these poets uh, of English literature, in many poems, really touching poems where they have been able to touch truth through symbolism, through imagery. So these murmurs and whispers crowd around our hearts, as if, imagine our hearts as if at the back of the heart something wants to manifest itself. Some really inspirational, admirational stuff still lying unmanifest, but finds no window. It's struggling to find a window of manifestation. Now all these unheard sounds and the struggles which want to manifest themselves in manifestation, they, as if they swelled, as if, like, they became pregnant into a canticle, into a sacred song. All of those intensities merged together and formed, swelled into this canticle, a sacred song, which Ashwapati is able to hear. They all want to tell him something. They all want to express some longing to Ashwapati. Of all that suffers to be still unknown. It is all the impossibilities which have not yet manifested in the being. It's almost suffering because it is still unknown. It is not even met. We live in such obscurity in our day-to-day life, because, and we don't even know who we truly are. Such a misery at times it feels, such a sad, state of being. And that is why I think Kabir says that the whole world is laughing and enjoying, but I am, really crying and weeping, because I see what are the possibilities which are not able to manifest owing to ignorance of the being. All that suffers to be still unknown, and all that labors vainly to be born. So imagine, labor pains are happening, but the child is not coming out. How miserable. And all that labors vainly to be born, vainly, in vain. All those labor pains, all the attempts are almost in vain. So thick is the plunge of ignorance. And all the sweetness none will ever taste. This is the bounty of life which we are not able to taste, owing to the thick veil uh, of thoughts, of feelings, of, sense perceptions. These are the thick veils which obscure our truth from us. And this is why human birth has been called as precious, because it's only in human birth that we can kind of, remove the dark layers of obscurity and get in touch with our truth. It is not a possibility in other creatures. They are just one with their truth. They don't have any possibility of rising up from that particular level of consciousness. All the sweetness none will ever taste, and all the beauty that will never be. Almost, one feels a sadness coming when I was reading these lines, that, the beauty that would just lie unmanifested, owing to the fact that our ignorance is so kind of, strong. And yet, along with that, paradoxically, there is also a certitude that no matter if late, it will someday be born. We may not be there in our human form, but it will, there is this divine certitude that the task will be done, which mother also refers to, in her prayers and meditations, that the divine victory shall be won. There is no doubt about that. Yeah, so all that communicates to Ashwapati, which in normal life we are not able to hear, these murmurs and whispers. Yeah.
Monica, you must have covered this, but somehow I missed it. To
Yeah.
enter swelled into a canticle.
Yeah.
Canticle had something to do with chanting or something. I am not sure. What
Yeah.
did this mean to enter
Yeah.
swelled into?
Yeah. So I referred to this as a sacred song. What I was getting to know about this is as if it's swelled up into a sacred song. Canticle, as you said, refers to that, almost like, a chant going up from all those darker, subconscious,
Got it. So all these
unconscious
murmurs and
realms.
whispers you said were became into a like turned into
Yes,
a sacred song.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
Swelled would means become bigger, right?
They
Like
became,
yes.
yeah, now they were
Yeah.
able to manifest themselves. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Who would like to read the blue one?
Inaudible to our deaf mortal ears, the wide world rhythms wove their stupendous chant, to which life strives to fit our rhyme beats here, melting our limits in the illimitable, tuning the finite to infinity.
Yes. So, all these unmanifest truths of the being, all these unmanifest possibilities, as if they keep on pressing, they keep on pressing on our being. Somehow we keep on getting hints that something is, I'm missing out on something, or, something is bothering me. I don't know exactly what the being wants to communicate to me, but there is something which I'm not able to clearly see, clearly hear, or, the inner voice, I'm not able to hear that. So this is how these unmanifest possibilities, the unmanifest truth, wants to kind of knock at our door and tell us that, something is waiting to be manifested. So these are the kind of signals that we keep on getting from our inner being, uh, you know and also in our outer manifestation through kind of diseases, illnesses, and all the things that we go through in life. That something more wants to be born, in the being, some unmanifest possibility so far. So that all that is usually inaudible to our deaf mortal ear. Look at this, our deaf mortal ears. Amazing. We think that we are hearing. We were talking about listening that day. We think that we hear. Inaudible to our deaf mortal ears, because our mortal ears are just sensitive to grosser sounds. They are so gross in their sensitivity. So although we still would not call ourselves deaf, we will say yes, I can hear perfectly, but maybe we can't. Maybe we can't even hear those refiner sounds which want to manifest themselves, and we have no way, because the clamor and chaos of the ego and the stories is too strong, and that almost gets masked beneath, somewhere beneath those layers, and that's why our mortal ears are referred to as deaf. We are not able to hear those sounds, those unheard sounds. But now Ashwapati is able to do that. The wide world rhythms wove their stupendous chant, to which life strives to fit our beats here. You know, as if uh, there is a certain world rhythm which can be called as the rhythm of truth, right? And knowingly or unknowingly, our beings, our lives are trying to fit our rhyme to those beats. We may not even know. One may be completely in oblivion, that why is one following a certain path in life, you know? And those actions in our day-to-day lives, those passions or whatever, you know, the path that we take in our day-to-day life, it's somewhere in oblivion trying to fit the rhythm. You know, the last line that Sri Aurobindo says here, tuning the finite to infinity. So the impulse, the life impulse is so strong of the soul that even without knowing, in its almost distorted attempts, it is trying to tune itself to the infinite possibilities, to the truth, to the absolute, to the truth of the being. You know, melting our limits in the illimitable. We all have touched these spaces once in a while in our life. It is not a possibility that we haven't. The wide world rhythms wove their stupendous chant, you know, as if they are weaving a chant, you know, which is going up to the divine, to which, and this chant, what is trying to get aligned to this chant, to which our life strives to fit our rhyme beats here. So usually we find that there is a lot of disharmony. The universe is in some other flow and I am in some other flow. But even knowingly or unknowingly, at times life strives to fit the rhymes of its own or the beats of its own to this wide world rhythm, which is, you know, rising up in a stupendous chant. It's almost, you know, also reminded me of you know, the thing that we discuss in our sessions, that most of the times we are aligned to the ego. You know, we are feeding our story, we are serving the ego, we are the servitors of ego, and that is why mother says that we are serving the falsehood. Ego is the biggest falsehood because it isn't even there. It is just a figment of imagination, and it appears so real. The story in the head appears so real that we just keep on serving it all our life, uh, re- uh, you know, without knowing that we must be serving the truth and not the story. So this is how we get misaligned by serving falsehood. You know, we are not collaborating in that way with the divine. But uh, no matter I may be serving the ego, life situations will slowly turn me into the direction that I will have no chance but to serve the truth. It may take a longer time though, because if I'm not collaborating per se, knowingly collaborating, knowingly not letting go of my stories, then life situations will turn in some or the other way that I will have to be a servitor of truth, because that is who we truly are. You know? And if we continue to serve the ego, if we continue to serve the misery of stories, we will continue to suffer, because that is, suffering is a reminder that I am serving the falsehood. You know, I'm not serving, I'm serving just a figment of imagination, which I should not be serving. And that is why we feel this disharmony in the being. If people are sensitive enough, we do feel this disharmony as soon as we begin to serve the story. And it's good that we are able to sense that. Yeah. And in those moments where our rhyme beats connect or align themselves to the stupendous chant of world rhythm, almost our limits are melted in the illimitable. The limits of me and my little self are melted for a moment, if not for a longer time, and tuned, it tunes the finite into the infinity. The so-called limited being in that moment gets tuned into the infinite truth, the absolute, the divine, the infinite consciousness, which is our true being. And this is also a paradox, you know, tuning the finite to the infinity. How can finite be tuned into infinity? Is that a possibility? Yes, it is a possibility. And this is what we would call, you know, the art of life. The art of life would be then to constantly uh, fall into, you know, delimiting ourselves and old patterns and tendencies will keep on coming, trying to limit us, constrict us. And yet we, being the warriors, the Kabir says that I need a warrior on this path. This is what he means by being a warrior, that no matter how many times you may fail and fall a prey to another story, rise up again and serve the truth, rise up again and serve the truth. And this is where we melt the limit in the illimitable, because truth is illimitable, truth is limitless. Yeah. Anything here? Okay, then who would like to read next? The pink lines.
Monica, the word melting.
Hanji.
Melting our limits in the illimitable.
Mm-hmm.
So we are, I don't know, I'm fine. The to which life tries to filter. We are trying, I mean, that's what, who's melting what? Like, and so,
Yeah. So anything that gets solidified, only that needs to melt, right? So we see
okay.
that in our daily lives, we solidify as a particular person having a particular story, that gets solidified, and that limits us, as if we form a boundary around ourselves. So
Got
that,
it.
yeah, that is the
Got
melting. Yeah. So Shreya, would you like to read? Do you have the capacity? Yeah.
Hi, Monica. I'll just prefer to listen today.
Chalo,
Not
okay.
feeling very well.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go, Monica.
Yes.
A low muttering rose from the subconscious caves, the stammer of the primal ignorance. Answer to that inarticulate questioning, there stooped with lightning neck and thunder's wings, a radiant hymn to the inexpressible, and the anthem of the superconscient light.
Yeah. A low muttering, we know what muttering is. Imagine that somebody you meet and he's just muttering a few words. They are not very clear words, but it's like, maybe complaining, or like grumbling about a particular situation, but something which is not very clear, but it's almost like, feels like a complaint, complaining about the life, complaining about why on earth am I in this situation, something about that. A low muttering rose from the subconscient caves, the stammer of primal ignorance, all these dead patterns and tendencies which keep on going on forever, as if a murmur, a mutter rising from those subconscient patterns. They are also trapped. They are not very liberated being a pattern. It's not very liberating being a pattern. So almost like a complaint rises up, which is not a very articulate complaint. It's not that, uh, because it is full of ignorance. The clarity is not there, the speech clarity is not there. It is not even able to say it clearly what is actually the matter. Those complaints from the subconscient caves. And yet, no matter how inarticulate that questioning is, that why on earth it has to be like that, and why am I suffering, and why does it continue like this throughout the years and eons and centuries, something like that is coming up from subconscient caves. The stammer, almost a stammer, it's not a clear questioning of primal ignorance. Answer to that inarticulate questioning. So, what comes in response to that inarticulate questioning? They're stooped with lightning neck and thunder's wing. This is reference to a bird, almost a divine bird that stoops down, as if a bird stoops down for its prey. Maybe a rat or something it has seen below on the earth. A radiant hymn to the inexpressible. So, this is what comes in as a response to that muttering and stammer from the subconscient caves. And that is what Mother also says so many times, to so many disciples also, that no matter how inarticulate your prayer may be, it will be answered. It will be answered. If it's a prayer, it will be answered. The divine will respond. So, in answer to that inarticulate questioning, there is a response. And the response is in the image of this beautiful big bird with a lightning neck and thunder's wing, like it's strong, it's powerful. The response is strong. A radiant hymn to the inexpressible and the anthem of the superconscient light, as if a consoling comes from the higher planes that yes, you will be liberated. A radiant hymn, as if a chant, a constant song of chant is going on, which is at the feet of the Lord. Hymn to the inexpressible, that who cannot be expressed, and the anthem of superconscient light. That the light or the clarity from the higher realms will be guiding them, will be answering them, will be putting light into their darkness. So that is the response, almost an imagery. It's just like a hint that we get, because it is so hard to express with words are really limiting in nature when it comes to expressing these subtle domains. And that is why imagery is again and again used. Now imagery of this bird, and many of these are even identified by Sri Aurobindo as if he has seen these happenings, and that's why he is writing these words. So at times it is an imagery, and at times it also feels that Sri Aurobindo also said to many of the people who communicated with him with regarding Savitri, that it is my experience. I know it by experience, and that is why I cannot change the word here. I know this is truth. So again, that is up to us in our silent reflections. What more dawns to us upon these lines? Yeah.
Yeah, that's why these are called mantric lines, no? Like
Yeah.
rishis, yeah, they used to receive mantras like that only, actually.
Yes.
And that, yeah, there are some lines also about mantras. I forgot those page actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm. Totally. And just like a mantra, always whenever we read them, and in silence and in calm quietude, whenever there is a possibility, something more will be revealed. Something more will be revealed. Some other angle, some other angle. So there's no end to the revelation of a mantra. One can never say that I have gotten the mantra fully, because there'll be more and more and more and more to that mantra. There are layers and layers of consciousness in which we can understand that. And Savitri is again like that. Yeah.
All was revealed there, none can here express. Vision and dream were fables spoken by truth, or symbols more veridical than fact, or were truths enforced by supernatural seals.
Yes. So this is again revelations by, after revelations happening to Ashwapati. All was revealed there, none can here express. So in those realms, in those planes of consciousness, all those facts and not facts really, truths of life, all the truth of life was revealed to Ashwapati in layers after layers and layers after layers that do not get any possibility to express in the day-to-day earthly realm, as if we have to become more and more sublimer in nature to touch those realms, which are parallelly coexisting with our mortal realm. So all those were revealed. The subtler worlds, they were they opened up to Ashupati's vision. And this language, as we know, the language of dreams and visions also, this language is a very special language. Those of us, uh, yeah, Shreya, you have something to ask?
No, sorry, that was by mistake.
Acha, acha. So this language, how those realms communicate to us is in visions, in dreams, in symbols, in imagery. So we have dreams, right? And in dreams, something more of life gets revealed. Some or the other fabrication happens in the dream, as if that symbolism wants to show us something more that is there to life. And this is how these other realms communicate with our mortal existence, with the day to day ordinary consciousness, in form of visions, in form of dreams, in form of imagery, in form of fables spoken by truth. Look at the word fables spoken by truth, as if truth wants to manifest itself by wanting to tell us a fable which has a deep deep meaning somewhere. How a life should be lived, or what is the purpose of this in life or that in life, whatever. So vision and dream were fables spoken by truth. This is how truth communicated to us. Or symbols more veridical than fact. Now if we talk about symbols, symbols speak more than words. We can interpret layers after layers and layers after layers of symbolism. The symbol of, uh, for example, the chakra in our flag, or maybe mother's symbol, or Sri Aurobindo's symbol, all these symbols. So symbolism speaks more, which words cannot take us there. Symbols more veridical than fact. When we talk about fact and figures and numbers, they have a very limited capacity to express truth to us. More often than not, they will keep on obscuring a larger part of truth. But it is not so with symbols and visions, right? So veridical meaning is speaking truth. It's also related to verity or verdict. When there is a verdict going to come, or verify, it's all related to truth. So veridical means that which is able to speak the truth. Symbols more able to speak the truth than a fact, or were truths enforced by supernatural seals. As if, there used to be these seals, right? That little gooey paste on which the king will stamp his seal, and then it means that it is confirmed, that it is authority of the king on that particular command. So those truths got revealed to Ashupati, on which there were seals of supernatural powers. That yes, this shall be done. This shall be done. All those truths enforced. And once the seal of the supernatural is there, once the seal of high command is there, it definitely has carry a certitude that yes, it will be done in near future or far future. So this is all that got revealed to Ashwapati, which usually does not get revealed to us in our ordinary state of consciousness. Yeah. And truth, truth does not need any reason. Truth can be absolutely illogical. And that is why they say do not ever try to formulate divine into a concept, because divine can be completely, manifest in infinite possibilities. Yeah, it's also like a guarantee, yes, like a certitude that yes, I confirm its authenticity. You know, so you can be sure that this will be done. So this is what got revealed to Ashupati. Truths that are far beyond our mental reasoning and capacity. Truth does not need a reason to manifest out in action. It can be absolutely irreasonable, right? And these were all revealed. Yeah. Yeah, symbols more veridical than fact. Yeah. Yes.
Immortal eyes approached and looked in his, and beings of many kingdoms neared and spoke. The ever living, whom we name as dead, could leave their glory beyond death and birth, to utter the wisdom which exceeds all phrase, the King of evil and the King of good. Appellant at the reason's judgment seat, proclaimed the gospel of their opposites, and all believed themselves spokesmen of God, the God of light, and titans of the dark, battled for his soul as for a costly prize.
Yeah. So these are a little difficult lines, but let's see how much we can go through. Immortal eyes approached and looked in his. Now, owing to the fact that Ashupati is capable of that sensitivity, he's shown more and more and more. As we also understand and kind of read through in mother's words, that as and when ignorance, almost, Sri Aurobindo calls ignorance as an almost a necessity in the beginning. For example, one is sleeping, right? So in the beginning, while you are half awake and trying to get awake in the morning, you would not love to have direct rays of strong sunlight falling on your eyes. So the curtain will serve as a kind of a hindrance, so that a lot of sun rays do not directly fall on your eyes, which are so for a longer time have been immersed in darkness, through sleep. So that's how ignorance serves us. And as and when we become ready to let go of the layers and layers and layers of ignorance, they are shed and shed and shed and shed. So we become more and more sensitive in order to receive the light of the divine. So as Ashwapati has become more and more kind of open and sensitive in his consciousness, more and more realms are kind of shown to him. Immortal eyes approached and looked in his. Immortal eyes. And beings of many kingdoms neared and spoke to Ashwapati, the ever living, whom we name as dead. Now this can be referred to all these gyanis and masters who have come and who we think have left their physical bodies. Swami Vivekananda, Mahavatar Baba, all these people, Ramana Maharishi, Sri Aurobindo, Mother. We think that once they leave the mortal body, they are not there, but they are still there. They are the one who are guiding beacons of light to each one of us on this earth. The ever living, whom we name as dead, whom we name as dead, we say that they are not there anymore, could leave their glory beyond death and birth to utter the wisdom which exceeds all phrase. To utter the wisdom which exceeds all phrase, how to communicate that wisdom which is not communicated through words. That is what got communicated to Ashupati by these ever living masters. This also, again, as we know that Savitri is story of Sri Aurobindo and mother herself. In Alipur jail, when Sri Aurobindo was there, Swami Vivekanand visited. His spirit came to to Sri Aurobindo and told him the next steps that had to be taken. And he says that until I really got what he had to say, he kept on coming and coming and coming, and telling me what to do, what is to be done. It's almost like I think Swami Vivekanand also had this experience, if I'm not wrong, that the spirit of his guru also came to him and communicated with him, once he had left the physical body. So these, we think that they are not there, but all those realms are parallelly existing, with us, mortal existence. So they communicated with Ashwapati to utter the wisdom which exceeds all phrase, the kings of evil and the kings of good. Now, just like there are wise teachers and masters in those realms, there are also evil forces, who wants to occupy the forces of darkness, the forces of hostile forces, which Mother says, they want to occupy the divine creation. So both the parties, kind of, the devas and the asuras, both want to now communicate to Ashupati, the kings of evil and the kings of good, appellants at the reason's judgment seat, which try to kind of mold our reason to either this or that side. Represent appellants means representatives of the at the reasons, their own representative, like the representative of evil, representative of good, and now they are trying to push the reason in one or the other direction, proclaimed the gospel of their opposites. So they kind of communicated what they had to say, that why I should be listened to, and why we should be able to manifest in this creation. And all believed themselves spokesmen of God. This was a little hilarious when I read this. That we try to mold reason into our own alignment with my own story, that I know why this should happen in my life. I have a particular reason, and the whole kind of a dictate that I can present in my, what can I say, like my companion, like a companion, I can kind of give a whole dictate that why this should happen in my life. So there is a whole reason, there is a whole series of justification to it, and all believed themselves spokesmen of God, that I am the one who is representing the truth. I am representing the truth. So listen to me, listen to me. The gods of light and titans of dark, the gods of light and titans of dark battled for his soul as for a costly prize. Now, why are they battling for Ashupati's soul? Why? As if, they are going to win Ashupati. Maybe the Devas or the gods of light win Ashupati in their party, or maybe the titans of the dark win Ashupati in their party. So they are trying to kind of, communicate with Ashupati, and if Ashupati falls into their category, in the sense, he agrees that, okay, I am with you, it's like one victory won for their party. So, unka palda bhari ho gaya, imagine that you have a weighing balance. So, one party is up, and because one soul is now in their party. So, almost felt like that, battling for his soul as for a costly prize. Yeah, if you have anything to share here, please do.
What is the difference between the word gods and titans? The gods of
Ha.
light and titans of the
Ha.
dark?
So Titans, this word Sri Aurobindo has used in Savitri at two different points. One is to represent these evil forces,
Hmm.
and the other is when also he wants to refer to superhumanity, something which is more than being human, mortal human consciousness. So there also he uses this word Titan, like titanic forces,
हाँ,
which,
मतलब excel, that's what basically है ना,
yeah,
मतलब enormous or
enormous, huge,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, more than human, normal human capacity. Yeah.
So as in humans which have gone towards darkness,
So in,
titans of the
yeah,
dark.
so in
Hmm.
this particular case, I think he is using it as, yes, for example, asuras are very strong and they have a lot of power. They have
Hmm.
more power than normal humans. So that is what he is referring to in this particular line, and referring to also the evil tendency.
Hmm. And another thing, you had mentioned, I don't know who did you mention that had somebody had come, Guru has come after he died, na?
Yeah,
Who?
so I was mentioning about two.
Yeah,
Sri Aurobindo was visited by Swami Vivekanand, spirit
yeah, yeah,
is,
yeah,
and
yeah,
Swami Vivekanand, I heard of, I think, if I'm not wrong, from Autobiography of Yogi, that
yeah.
he was visited by his own guru when he passed over in the other realm.
Autobiography for Yogi was by Yogananda Paramhansa, na?
Hmm.
So he
So
was visited
yeah,
by his, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
वही
Yeah.
होगा हाँ.
And that's really kind of, it really surprises me that when Yogananda's guru, I forget his name, Yukteswar
Yukteswar
Swami,
Giri. Yeah.
had left. So how he had like kind of written it in his book that how shattered he was when his
Yes.
guru had left the body. And then he came and he mocked him, his guru kind of mocked him, ki, what are you doing? Ki, do you think I'm the body? And
Yeah.
stuff. And suddenly he, kind of got his thing back. Ki, yeah, what was I doing?
Yeah.
And similarly, in, how the Mahabharata, after hearing the whole discourse and everything, like the whole Gita, again, when the five children were dead, na?
Yeah.
Arjuna's five kids.
Yeah.
तो वो भी he was like again heartbroken and shattered. So there's something about, physical body
Oh.
that really kind of, I don't know, again takes us, I don't know, because material है दिख रहा है, so
बिल्कुल.
it's very interesting how
Yeah.
and
I think आप देखो the whole of earthly life from the very beginning the child is born. Who do we refer to the child as? We refer to him as the body. You are this, you are this. So this is so truly ingrained in our system, as if each cell has remembered itself as the physical body. I am this self, I am this self. And that is why the ego, which mostly in the thought and feelings, uh, it's very hard to get rid of the physical self that I think myself as the body. It's so hard. It's so hard. It's almost, a lifetime of a conditioning that has to be deconditioned almost every moment. Yeah, so totally this reference to the physical self. Yeah. Even mother, I remember when I read about Sri Aurobindo, when he passed away, he decided to leave his body. Even mother, had to go through a tough time then. Yeah. Yes, Chitraji.
Yeah, even that Ramana Maharishi's followers, no, after he left his body,
Yeah.
though he advocated to totally that principle, there is no body at all. Actually.
Yeah.
But after he left his body, all his followers, disciples could not tolerate. I mean that separation.
Bilkul.
Everyone went to all the temples, and then only after some time only they could compromise with that and came back to the ashram. It seems. Actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to that extent, everyone was affected.
Yeah.
Even though he strongly advocated, there is no body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why Mother and Sri Aurobindo brought that. I mean, they are totally. They said no, that it is not a illusion. Actually, you
Hmm.
have to bring the truth in the body. Also, they
Bring
tried.
the truth in the body. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. A long, dim preparation. I think that is what we are at, all of us. Okay, so let's read a few last lines and let's see how long we can go after this. This is really nice, a very nice few lines. Who would like to read?
I'll go, Monica.
Yes, please.
Okay. In every hour loosed from the quiver of time, there rose a song of new discovery, a bow tongue's hum of young experiment. Each day was a spiritual romance, as if he was born into a bright new world. Adventure leaped an unexpected friend, and danger brought a keen, sweet tang of joy. Each happening was a deep experience.
Yeah, yeah. So nice. Yeah, this is really nice. In every hour loosed from the quiver of time. Imagine we used to have these dhanush and ban, right? Bow and arrow. And then there is a quiver at the back which holds a lot of arrows. So as if each hour, look at this beautiful imagery, each hour was a arrow that was put in this quiver, a container of time. Beautiful description here. Each hour is referred to an arrow in the quiver of time. And as Ashupati is going from experience to experience, looking at worlds, realms after realms, in every hour, loosed from the quiver of time. So each hour that passed by when Ashupati was going through these experiences, as if the quiver of time is losing one by one these hours. And what is happening in these hours? There rose a song of a new discovery. So each hour is full of a new discovery, realm after realm, experience after experience, which is so far hidden, which is so far unknown. A bow twangs hum of young experiment. This is reference to this. If we listen to the voice of the bow and the arrow, when the arrow leaves the bow, trung, trung, all those sounds that come. So that is what is referring to here. A bow twangs hum of young experiment. So as if the time wants to show Ashupati in all its bounty what are the possibilities, infinite realms that are there in this universe, in this manifestation. And each hour became a beautiful new discovery. Each day was a spiritual romance. When I was going through, I discovered that romance, what we usually understand, Bollywood, Hollywood romance is something else. But what the literal meaning coming from English literature, the meaning of romance is a story which is full of beautiful adventures, which is full of really kind of adventurous adventures. A new happening after the another happening, a new after another happening. So that is what they call romance as in English literature. And that is what was happening with Ashupati. Each day was a spiritual romance, an adventure after another adventure, as if he was born into a bright new world. Ashupati is reborn into a new world. Adventure leaped an unexpected friend. Adventure became an unexpected friend of Ashupati in this new world, in new realms. And danger brought a keen, sweet tang of joy. Now, when we go through adventures and we have to cross a particular danger, maybe a river or anything else, or maybe a danger in life in general, there is also a sweet tang of joy, like a sweet tang. Tang refers to this lime, taste of lime, tangy flavor, which we call. There is a special intensity in that taste. So the taste that danger and thrill can give us, a normal day-to-day life usually does not give us that tang. So each danger brought a keen, sweet. Now look at again the two parallelly placed words. Sweet tang. Sweet tang. Yes, Shreya, okay. Sweet tang of joy. And it is beautiful when we delimit ourselves by crossing one danger after another danger. So it almost feels like an expansion, a continuous expansion happening in life. That is the joy that Ashwapati was opened up to. Each happening was a deep experience. Each happening really brought a lot of depth in his life. And I would also connect this with our day-to-day life. It seems that our day-to-day life is mundane and monotone, while other things are more interesting. But we know, all of us know on this path, that it is not so. If each experience of life is lived deeply and intensely, that can also become an adventure. Ghar baithe baithe adventure. We don't even need to go to some extra travel location which is dangerous in order to experience that thrill and joy of life, the intensity of life. So that also, I was able to kind of get a taste of that when it said that each happening was a deep experience and adventure leaped an unexpected friend. So when we stop taking for granted the normal day to day life experiences, that I know what fear is, I know what anxiety is, I know what panic is, and saying that I don't know what it is and just meet it for the first time, I think that itself is a beautiful adventure. Then each and every happening of life becomes a friend called adventure. Yeah, so that's what was coming to me here. I think I'm done from my side. If you have anything to share, please share.
Even those mechanical thoughts, no?
Yeah,
If you meet them and cross over them, also it is that itself.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
really.
bilkul.
Yeah.
Mother used to say when she was little, she would not go to all these circus and entertainments that other kids would go to, right, for having fun in life. I think that also I can relate with it now more than not. That why she would not feel the need to go out for any adventures, because life can become an adventure when the inner life, opens itself, its doors, one after the another, one after the another. Then each and every happening during the day can, bring this feeling of adventure. So why would be the need to go to a circus for entertainment? There is so much of entertainment happening within the being. Yeah. Okay, then. Thank you for joining.